For the first time in my life, someone grabbed me with such desperate intensity. I stood frozen in the palace's grand marble hallway, consciously suppressing my omega scent as I'd been trained to do in the presence of nobility. The imperial courier assignment had seemed straightforward enough. Deliver diplomatic scrolls to the emperor's private secretary, collect the signature, and leave. Simple. Professional. Nothing that would change the trajectory of my entire existence. Then a small hand clutched my silk robe with surprising strength. Looking down, I found myself staring into the tear-stained face of a 4-year-old child. Golden eyes, rare even among the imperial bloodline, shimmered with unshed tears beneath messy black hair that clearly hadn't been combed that morning. His cheeks bore the dried tracks of what must have been hours of crying, and his tiny voice trembled as he spoke. "Please don't leave me. Will you be my male mommy? Please?" My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. This wasn't just any child clinging to a stranger's robes in a moment of childish whimsy. This was Prince Aiden Ashford, the Emperor's only son and heir to the greatest empire in the known world. The rumors about him had spread far beyond the palace walls. How his mother died bringing him into this world. How his father couldn't bear to look at him. How he'd been raised by a rotating cast of servants who treated him more like an obligation than a person. I'd come here as nothing more than a low-ranking Omega courier trying to make an honest living. My family's small delivery company barely scraped by, taking whatever assignments we could find. Today's task was supposed to be my biggest accomplishment yet, entering the imperial palace even just to drop off documents. I never imagined it would lead to this moment. "Aiden, release him immediately." That voice carried such bone-chilling coldness that my spine stiffened involuntarily. I raised my eyes slowly, afraid of what I'd see, and came face to face with Emperor Cale Ashford himself for the first time in my life. He was impossibly tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of an empire. Every muscle in his body radiated alpha dominance so potent it felt like a physical pressure against my skin. His silver eyes, legendary for their ability to freeze men where they stood, locked onto me with an expression that held absolutely no warmth. Emotionless, calculating, dangerous in a way that made every instinct in my omega biology scream at me to submit, to lower my eyes, to make myself smaller. His pheromones hit me like a tidal wave. Strong, overwhelming, completely unavoidable despite my best efforts to shield myself. My body reacted before my mind could stop it. Knees weakening, breath catching, every omega instinct I'd spent years learning to control suddenly surging to the surface. An invisible force seemed to wrap around me, making movement impossible. I said, "Let go, Aiden." The Emperor's voice dropped even lower, each word precisely enunciated. But the small prince only gripped my robe tighter, his knuckles turning white with the effort. It was as if his entire world depended on maintaining that connection to me, as if releasing the fabric would mean losing something irreplaceable. "No, he's warm, father," Aiden cried out, his voice breaking. "He smells like Mama did." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every servant in the hallway seemed to hold their breath simultaneously. The Emperor's eyes narrowed dangerously, his jaw tightening until I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. He took a single step toward me, threatening, predatory, and I knew with absolute certainty that this alpha now viewed me as a threat to his son. Perhaps a spy, maybe a manipulator using some kind of pheromone trick to ensnare the vulnerable child. "What is your name, Omega?" His voice had dropped to such a low register that it vibrated through my chest. "C. Coulson." I managed to whisper, though my throat felt like it was closing. "Coulson Cross." The Emperor studied me as if I were a puzzle he needed to solve before it exploded, or perhaps a threat that required immediate elimination. His piercing gaze stripped away every defense I had, leaving me feeling utterly exposed. Then he made a sharp gesture to his guards. "Take him to the detention chamber. I want a thorough investigation into who he is, why he's really here, and who he works for. And get Aiden back to his room." "Wait, Your Majesty, please. I'm just a courier, I only came to—" But before I could finish explaining, guards materialized on either side of me, their grips firm and unyielding on my arms. Aiden's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. He began sobbing loudly, his small voice rising to a desperate shriek that echoed off the marble walls and vaulted ceilings. "No! Don't take him away. Male mommy. Male mommy. His cries followed me down the corridor as the guards pulled me away, each anguished wail like a knife to my heart. I caught one final glimpse of the Emperor before they dragged me through the doorway. He stood motionless, his expression completely blank as he listened to his son's heart-wrenching screams. There was no reaction, no softening, nothing to indicate the sound affected him at all. It was as if his heart had been carved from stone instead of flesh. The detention chamber was exactly as terrible as I'd imagined. Cold stone walls that seemed to absorb all warmth. A single small window too high to reach, and the kind of silence that makes you acutely aware of your own breathing. They left me there without explanation, without timeline, without any indication of what would happen next. As I sat on the hard bench in that frigid room, watching the sunlight fade from that unreachable window, a single thought crystallized in my mind with devastating clarity. I had walked into the wrong place at exactly the wrong moment. My simple courier job had somehow transformed into something I couldn't begin to understand, and there was a very real possibility that my normal life, my family, my work, my freedom, might never return. The small prince's golden eyes haunted me. The desperation in his grip, the way he'd called me male mommy as if he'd been searching for exactly that comfort his entire short life. And beneath it all, the Emperor's cold silver gaze, evaluating me like a specimen under glass. What had I stumbled into? And more terrifyingly, how would I ever escape? They retrieved me from detention just before dawn, when darkness still clung thick to the chamber's corners. I'd spent the entire night expecting interrogation, possibly torture, maybe even execution depending on what conclusions they'd drawn about my presence in the palace. Instead, as pale light began creeping through that high window, the door opened and the same guards from yesterday gestured for me to follow. Relief flooded through me. Perhaps this had all been a terrible misunderstanding and they were finally releasing me. That hope died the moment they led me into Emperor Kale's private study. The room itself was designed to intimidate. Dark wood furniture that looked centuries old, shelves lined with ancient texts in languages I couldn't read, and an overwhelming scent of authority that permeated every surface. This was a space where decisions affecting millions of lives were made, where high nobles and trusted advisors came only when summoned. And now I stood here, an ordinary Omega courier, waiting for judgment I couldn't begin to predict. The Emperor sat behind his massive desk, absorbed in reviewing documents as if I didn't exist. 2 full minutes passed in absolute silence. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge my presence, simply continued reading and making occasional notes with a fountain pen that probably cost more than my family's entire business. His cold dominance filled the room like a physical weight, making it difficult to breathe properly. I stood perfectly still, afraid that even the smallest movement might draw his attention in a negative way. Finally, without raising his eyes from the papers, he spoke. "I have a proposition for you, Coulson." "A proposition?" The word came out confused, tinged with residual fear from my night in detention. "My son has formed an attachment to you." His voice remained completely emotionless, as if discussing a business transaction rather than his child's feelings. "For the past 2 years, Aiden hasn't properly spoken to anyone. Not the therapists I've hired, not the nannies, not even family members who've tried to connect with him. Each new caretaker seems to traumatize him further, pushing him deeper into isolation. But last night when he encountered you, something changed. For the first time since his mother's death, he genuinely reacted to another person." My throat went dry. I could sense where this conversation was heading, and the implications terrified me. "So you want me to live here in the palace? Become Aiden's permanent companion? We'll formalize it through a contract." He finally looked up and those silver eyes held no trace of warmth or compassion. "1 year. If Aiden shows improvement, if he stabilizes and begins recovering from his trauma, you'll receive substantial financial compensation and your freedom restored. However, if you refuse this offer..." He paused deliberately, letting the weight of unspoken threat settle over me like a shroud. "Your courier company's license will be permanently revoked. Your family's business will be completely destroyed. Do you understand the choice you're being given?" My heart sank into my stomach. This wasn't an offer at all. This was blackmail dressed up in formal language. A cage disguised as an opportunity. "Your Majesty, I'm just an Omega with no special training," I said carefully, trying to find any angle that might change his mind. "You could hire professional caretakers, noble omegas with proper education and experience working with traumatized children. Someone qualified. I don't need qualifications, Coulson. He cut me off with brutal efficiency. I need results. Your scent composition matches my late wife's on a chemical level. That's why Aiden responded to you. Your omega pheromones trigger memories of his mother, providing comfort he hasn't felt in 2 years. That's all the qualification I require. His blunt words struck me like a physical blow. So that was it. I wasn't being offered this position because of any skill or worthiness. I was simply a biological replacement, a walking scent match for a dead woman. Not a person, just a tool to serve a purpose. If I agree, I said slowly, choosing my words with extreme care, will I have any control over my own life in this arrangement? He looked at me as if the question itself was fundamentally absurd. Your only choice is whether to accept or refuse. Everything else falls under my complete authority. Where you live, when you can leave the palace grounds, who you interact with, all of it requires my explicit permission. Is that clear enough? What could I possibly say? The illusion of choice had already shattered. My family depended on the courier business to survive. If he destroyed it, they'd lose everything they'd built over 3 generations. Yes, I whispered, defeated before the battle had even begun. I accept your terms. He nodded once, no satisfaction, no emotion whatsoever. Just acknowledgement of a successful negotiation. Then he slid an elaborate document across the desk toward me, its edges sealed with golden wax bearing the imperial crest. Sign here. From this moment forward, you are officially Aiden's companion Omega. You'll occupy a designated chamber adjacent to his rooms. Leaving the palace without authorization is strictly forbidden. You're required to spend a minimum of 6 hours daily with the prince. And most importantly, he leaned forward, his silver eyes boring into mine with laser focus. You are absolutely prohibited from unnecessary interaction with me or any other alpha within these walls. If I observe you engaging in friendly conversation or close proximity with another alpha, this contract terminates immediately, and the consequences for you will be severe. Am I making myself perfectly clear, Coulson? My breath caught in my throat. But what if there's an emergency situation where, no exceptions? His tone carried the finality of a death sentence. Emergency or otherwise, if I see you near another alpha, you're finished here. Understand? I could only nod, words failing me completely as the full reality of my imprisonment crystallized. He pushed the document closer. With trembling hands, I picked up the pen and signed my name, watching the ink dry on each stroke. It felt less like signing a contract and more like signing away my soul, my autonomy, my entire future. The moment that final stroke was complete, my freedom ceased to exist. Guards escorted me from the study to my new quarters, a beautifully appointed chamber with silk curtains, expensive furniture and all the trappings of luxury. But the door locked from the outside. The windows looked out only at high palace walls. And despite the soft fabrics and ornate decorations, I felt trapped in a gilded cage. Through my window I could see into what must be Aiden's room. The small prince sat alone on his floor, knees drawn to his chest, rocking back and forth in a motion that spoke of deep untreated trauma. And suddenly I understood. We were both prisoners here. He'd lost his mother. I'd lost my freedom. 2 captives in a beautiful prison, bound together by forces beyond our control. The first week taught me exactly how challenging this assignment would truly be. Aiden remained almost completely nonverbal, spending entire days sitting motionless with his toys arranged around him in precise patterns he never actually played with. He avoided eye contact with everyone, including me. Whenever I attempted to engage him in gentle conversation or activities, he would retreat to the far corner of his room, watching me with those haunted golden eyes as if waiting for me to abandon him like everyone else had. This wasn't a spoiled prince throwing tantrums. This was a deeply traumatized child who'd learned that emotional connection only led to pain and loss. I decided to try a completely different strategy. Each morning, I would sit outside his door without trying to force entry or interaction. No pressure, no expectations. I simply made myself a consistent presence, telling stories to the closed door, humming lullabies my own mother had sung to me, allowing my omega pheromones to flow naturally rather than suppressing them as I'd been taught. I wanted him to associate my presence with safety, not obligation. Progress came in microscopic increments. On the third day I noticed the door had been opened just a crack, though Aiden remained out of sight. On the fifth day he sat in the doorway itself, still not speaking but listening intently to the story I was telling. On the eighth day he cautiously reached out and touched my sleeve with one small finger, testing whether I would pull away or stay. The breakthrough came on the 10th day when he actually smiled, a real genuine smile that revealed small dimples in his cheeks. My heart felt like it might burst. "Coulson?" His voice was soft, uncertain. "You promise you won't leave?" "I promise, Aiden," I answered honestly, returning his smile. "I'm staying right here with you." He threw his arms around me in a desperate hug, and I held him carefully, feeling his small body finally relax against mine. This moment made every frustrating day worth enduring. What had started as a forced contract was transforming into something real, a genuine bond that affected me far more than I'd anticipated. But building trust with Aiden created an unexpected complication. The Emperor was watching. I began noticing him observing us from his private balcony whenever Aiden and I spent time in the palace gardens. Those intense silver eyes tracked our movements as we played simple games, as Aiden laughed for the first time in years, as the boy fell asleep peacefully in my lap during afternoon rest periods. Kale's alpha dominance seemed to extend across the physical distance, creating an invisible pressure I could feel even without seeing him directly. One evening after settling Aiden into bed, I was returning to my chambers when the Emperor appeared seemingly from nowhere, blocking the corridor. "Coulson." I stopped immediately, my heart rate spiking. "Yes, Your Majesty." He moved closer, close enough that his scent overwhelmed my senses. Pine and leather and something uniquely his that made my omega biology react in ways I'd been desperately trying to suppress. My instincts screamed submission, but I forced myself to maintain composure and remember the boundaries he'd established. "You've been good for him," Kale said quietly, and I detected something unexpected in his voice. Perhaps confusion, conflict? "Aiden has made progress I never thought possible. He laughs now, talks, engages with the world. This is beneficial." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm just trying." "But remember what I told you." His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with firm pressure that sent electricity racing up my arm. "You're here for Aiden exclusively, not for me. That boundary cannot blur. Understood?" My breathing became shallow. "Yes, I understand completely." His eyes searched mine with unsettling intensity. "Then explain something to me." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Why does every fiber of my alpha nature respond to you whenever you're near? Why does my body want to claim you when I know that's absolutely forbidden?" I couldn't breathe. Was he actually admitting attraction? "I don't know." "Don't lie to me, Coulson." His grip tightened slightly, bordering on painful. "You feel it too. This pull between us. This dangerous chemistry we're both trying to ignore." He was right, and denying it felt pointless. Every time he came near, every time his scent reached me, my body reacted in ways I couldn't control. His gaze intensified, becoming almost hungry. "If you deliberately cross the boundaries I've set, if you try to manipulate this attraction to your advantage, I will remove you from this palace instantly. I don't care how attached Aiden has become. This is your only warning." He released my wrist abruptly and strode away, leaving me trembling against the wall. Back in my chamber, I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, unable to calm my racing thoughts. My wrist still tingled where he'd touched me. The memory of his scent lingered in my senses, and underneath the fear and confusion, I had to acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding. I was attracted to him, dangerously, impossibly attracted to the Emperor himself. This wasn't supposed to happen. I'd been brought here as a replacement for his dead wife, a source of comfort for his traumatized son, nothing more. Developing feelings for Cale Ashford, the man who'd essentially imprisoned me, who held absolute power over my fate, was the most foolish thing I could possibly do. Yet I couldn't deny what was happening. The way my heart raced when he entered a room. How my omega instincts responded to his alpha presence with an intensity I'd never experienced before. The magnetic pull he'd mentioned wasn't one-sided, and that realization terrified me more than anything else in this entire situation. Because in the power dynamic we existed in, with a contract that could be terminated at his whim and consequences that could destroy my family, allowing these feelings to grow was beyond dangerous. It was potentially catastrophic. I thought about Aiden sleeping peacefully in the next room, finally finding stability after years of isolation. I thought about my family depending on the compensation this contract would eventually provide. I thought about the Emperor's cold warning and the severe consequences he'd promised. Then I thought about the conflicted look in Cale's eyes when he'd admitted his own attraction, the way his voice had cracked slightly when speaking about what he felt. This situation was becoming far more complicated than a simple year-long contract. Emotions were involved now. Mine, Aiden's, and apparently even the Emperor's, despite his attempts to remain detached, and I had no idea how to navigate these treacherous waters without drowning everyone involved. 3 weeks into my contract, disaster struck without warning. Aiden collapsed with a sudden fever that spiked so high I could feel the heat radiating from his small body before I even touched him. One moment he'd been playing quietly with wooden blocks I'd carved for him, and the next he was lying on the floor, skin flushed an alarming shade of red, breathing in shallow gasps that sent panic shooting through my chest. I gathered him into my arms and carried him to his bed, immediately applying cold compresses to his forehead and neck. My omega pheromones flooded out instinctively, trying to provide whatever biological comfort they could offer. But nothing seemed to help. If anything, his temperature continued climbing despite my desperate efforts. "Coulson, don't go," he whispered through cracked lips, his small fingers clutching weakly at my shirt. "Stay with me. I'm scared." "I'm right here, Aiden," I assured him, pressing a gentle kiss to his burning knuckles. "I won't leave you." Not for a second. But as midnight approached, his condition deteriorated alarmingly. His breathing became rapid and labored, each breath seeming to require tremendous effort from his weakened body. I finally abandoned my attempts to handle this alone, and shouted for the guards stationed outside our chambers. They burst through the door, took one look at the prince's condition, and immediately dispatched someone to fetch the palace physician. Another guard hurried off on a different errand, and my stomach dropped when I realized he'd gone to alert the Emperor himself. The door flew open barely 5 minutes later. Cale strode in with an urgency I'd never witnessed from him before, his usual measured composure cracking to reveal genuine alarm. His silver eyes swept over Aiden's feverish form before landing on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "What happened?" The question came out harsh, but I could hear the underlying fear. "The fever came on suddenly," I explained quickly. "I've been trying to bring his temperature down, but nothing's working. It just keeps getting worse." Cale raised one hand, cutting off my explanation, and moved swiftly to his son's bedside. He placed his palm against Aiden's forehead with surprising gentleness, and I watched his jaw tighten as he registered just how dangerously hot the child's skin felt. Aiden's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Father?" His voice was barely audible, weak and confused. Something profound shifted in Cale's expression. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw his carefully maintained mask slip completely. Raw emotion flooded his features. Guilt, fear, love, regret, all mixing together in a way that made him look suddenly devastatingly human. "I'm here, son," Cale said, his normally cold voice softening to something almost tender. "Don't send Coulson away," Aiden mumbled, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. "He's mine. Only mine. Please don't take him." Cale went completely still. His gaze shifted to me, and I saw war playing out behind those silver eyes, conflicting emotions he couldn't quite suppress anymore. The physician arrived in a flurry of activity, conducting a thorough examination while Cale and I stood by helplessly. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the doctor prescribed medication and assured us that, with proper care, the fever should break by morning. He administered the first dose and promised to return at dawn to check on the prince's progress. Slowly, blessedly, Aiden's breathing began to even out as the medicine took effect. His grip on my hand remained firm even as exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. I couldn't move without risking waking him, so I settled in for what would clearly be a long night. Cale remained as well. He stood near the door for several minutes, arms crossed defensively over his chest, his expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, he pulled a chair close to where I sat and lowered Huff into it, closer than he'd ever positioned himself before. "You've cared for him remarkably well, Coulson," he said quietly after a long silence. "I didn't anticipate you would become so invested. This isn't just obligation for you anymore. is it? My heart began beating faster. This was the first time Kale had acknowledged our situation as anything beyond a business arrangement. The first time he'd recognized me as more than just a convenient biological solution to his son's trauma. Aiden deserves genuine affection, I replied softly, honestly. He needed someone to see him as more than a painful reminder. That's not his fault. He's just a child who lost his mother. Kale's jaw tightened visibly. Love. He repeated the word as if it were foreign to him, something he'd forgotten the meaning of. I've tried to give him that. I want to. But every time I look at him, all I see is her. And the fact that I'm responsible for her absence. My breath stopped. This was more vulnerability than I'd imagined Kale capable of showing. He buried his face in his hands. The mighty emperor reduced to a grieving widower. She died because of my selfishness, Coulson. Because I demanded an heir before her body was ready. The pregnancy complications. If I just waited, shown patience, she might still be alive, healthy, and Aiden would have his mother. I sat frozen, unable to find words adequate for such a devastating confession. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. His emotional distance from Aiden, his inability to show affection, the cold walls he'd built around himself. He wasn't heartless, he was drowning in guilt, punishing himself by denying himself the very connection his son desperately needed from him. Your Majesty, I began carefully. Aiden loves you. He doesn't blame you for what happened. He just wants you to see him. To let him know he's not alone in this world. Kale looked at me then, and I was shocked to see moisture gathering in his eyes. And you, Coulson, do you see me as human? Or just as the cold tyrant everyone believes me to do? My throat constricted. The question was so raw, so vulnerable, that answering felt like stepping off a cliff. I see both, I admitted truthfully. I see a powerful emperor who rules with absolute authority. But I also see a father broken by loss and guilt. Someone who doesn't know how to forgive himself. His hand reached out, wrapping gently around my wrist this time. Not possessive or threatening, but seeking connection. His touch radiated warmth I hadn't expected. Your scent, he murmured, closing his eyes as if savoring something precious, brings me a peace I haven't felt in years. Your presence here has changed something fundamental. I feel like perhaps I could learn to breathe again. My heartbeat thundered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. This moment felt impossibly intimate, dangerously vulnerable. We were crossing lines that should never be crossed, blurring boundaries that existed for very good reasons, and yet I couldn't bring myself to pull away. In that quiet room, with a sleeping child between us and the weight of confession hanging in the air, I understood that everything had irrevocably changed. Professional distance had crumbled. The walls we'd both maintained so carefully had developed cracks too wide to ignore. Whatever happened next would reshape all of our lives in ways I couldn't begin to predict. The following week brought unexpected transformation to our daily routine. Kale began appearing more frequently in spaces he'd previously avoided, joining us for breakfast in the morning room, walking with Aiden and me through the gardens in the afternoon, even sitting quietly in the corner during bedtime story says. I watched Aiden's face light up with joy each time his father chose to participate, and something warm bloomed in my chest seeing the distance between them gradually shrink. But something else was happening too. Something I hadn't anticipated and definitely shouldn't have encouraged. Kale started seeking me out for conversation beyond mere updates on his son's well-being. He asked about my thoughts on books I'd read, my opinions on the garden layouts, whether I found the palace staff respectful in their mirth of me. His formidable walls were crumbling brick by brick, and I found myself drawn toward him in ways that terrified me. One evening, after Aiden had fallen asleep peacefully following an especially happy day, a servant delivered a message requesting my presence on the Emperor's private terrace, a space I'd been told he rarely shared with anyone. I found him standing at the railing, moonlight casting silver highlights across his already pale hair. He looked almost ethereal, less like an emperor and more like something from the romantic poems my mother used to read. You asked to see me, Your Majesty? I said tentatively. He turned, and something in his expression made my stomach flip. When we're alone like this, I'd prefer you call me simply Kale. Can you do that? Heat flooded my face. Yes, Kale. His lips curved into the smallest smile. Tell me honestly, how do you feel about being here now? The truth, without filters. I considered lying. maintaining professional distance, but something about the openness in his expression made me want to match his vulnerability. At first, I felt trapped, like a bird in a golden cage. But now it feels different. Being with Aiden brings me joy. And being near you, I trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence safely. And being near me makes you feel, he prompted, stepping closer. Conflicted, I admitted. Confused. Things I shouldn't feel. His smile widened slightly. You've brought something back into my life that I thought died with my wife. You've reminded me what it means to hope. To feel anticipation for tomorrow instead of dreading it. He moved closer still, near enough that his alpha scent enveloped me completely. Pine and leather and something uniquely him, that made my omega instincts sing. My body responded automatically, pheromones releasing despite my attempts at control. We shouldn't be doing this, I whispered, even as I swayed toward him. The contract specifically forbids. Forget the contract, he said firmly, reaching up to cup my jaw and tilt my face toward his. I feel something for you that goes far beyond any agreement we signed. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm imagining this connection. I couldn't, because he wasn't imagining anything. This magnetic pull between us was undeniably real. He leaned down slowly, giving me every opportunity to retreat. If you want me to stop, say so now. I remained silent, paralyzed by want and fear and longing all tangled together. His lips met mine in a kiss that started gentle questioning, testing before deepening into something desperate and consuming. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him while I melted into the embrace, a rational thought evaporating. When we finally broke apart, both gasping for air, his eyes burned with possessive intensity. You belong to me now, he declared, his voice rough with emotion. No other alpha gets to touch you. No one else gets to even think about claiming you. Understood? I nodded wordlessly, too overwhelmed to form coherent sentences. But the next morning shattered our fragile bubble of intimacy. Duke William Grayson arrived for a diplomatic visit. He was everything an alpha typically presented: tall, handsome, charming to the point of being oily. He'd supposedly come to pay respects to young Prince Aiden, but his attention shifted to me the moment we were introduced. And who might you be? He asked, with a smile that showed too many teeth. Coulson Cross, the prince's companion, I replied politely but coolly. How fascinating. Your scent is quite remarkable. Lavender and honey, if I'm not mistaken. Very rare combination. Very enticing. I stepped back instinctively, uncomfortable with his proximity and the way his pheromones seemed to reach for mine. My omega biology responded despite my conscious rejection, and I hated every second of it. That's when Kale entered the room. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. His expression transformed from merely cold to absolutely lethal as he took in the scene. William standing too close, me backing away. The air thick with competing alpha scents. Duke Grayson, Kale said in a voice sharp enough to cut glass. You'll wait for me in the meeting hall. Immediately, William had the audacity to smirk before sauntering away, clearly aware he'd provoked exactly the reaction he'd wanted. Kale approached me with slow, predatory steps. What did he say to you? Nothing of consequence. He made you uncomfortable. I could smell your distress from the hallway. His hands clenched into fists. I told you that you belonged to me, Coulson. Only me. I didn't encourage him. I protested. I was trying to maintain professional courtesy. That's all. He backed me against the wall, caging me with his arms on either side of my head. Let me be absolutely clear. If I see another alpha pursuing you, showing interest, making you react, I will eliminate them. Permanently. This isn't a threat or a warning. It's a promise. You are mine. And I protect what's mine. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared into his eyes and saw something that went beyond mere possessiveness. This was obsession. Raw and dangerous and all-consuming. I should have been frightened. Maybe part of me was. But another part, the part that had already fallen for this complicated, damaged man, felt something else entirely. Desired. Claimed, wanted with an intensity I'd never experienced before. And that realization was perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. Everything fell apart within 48 hours of Duke William's visit. Rumors spread through the palace like wildfire, vicious gossip, claiming I was manipulating both father and son for personal gain, that I'd seduced the emperor while using the prince as cover, that my entire presence was part of some calculated scheme to rise above my station. The whispers followed me through corridors, servants falling silent when I passed, nobles eyeing me with open disdain. I could have weathered their judgment. But then Aiden overheard two maids discussing the scandal. He stopped coming to our usual meeting times. When I knocked on his door, he refused to answer. The one time I managed to corner him in the garden, the look of betrayal on his face nearly destroyed me. "Is it true?" he asked, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Do you want father more than you want to be my friend?" "Aiden. No. Those are lies meant to hurt us." "Then why does father look at you the way mother used to look at him in the paintings? Why does he get angry when other people talk to you?" His small hands balled into fists. "I thought you came here for me. I thought I finally had someone who was just mine. But you're going to choose him instead, aren't you? Just like everyone chooses him over me." He ran before I could respond, and my attempts to follow were blocked by his nanny, who informed me coldly that the prince had requested I leave him alone. I returned to my chambers and broke down completely, sobbing into my pillow until I had no tears left. That evening, Kale came to me, but the man who entered wasn't the one who'd kissed me on the terrace or confessed his feelings. This was the Emperor again, cold, distant, untouchable. "Your contract is terminated effective immediately," he announced without preamble. "You'll leave at first light tomorrow." The words hit like physical blows. "What? Why?" "Your presence is causing my son emotional harm. That was never the intention of this arrangement." His voice remained flat, emotionless. "I won't sacrifice Aiden's well-being for my own selfish desires. That this is final." "But you said you told me that you—" "What I said was a mistake." He cut me off harshly. "I allowed personal feelings to cloud my judgment. I'm an emperor first, Coulson. My duties to my son and my empire supers everything else. Surely you understand that. So everything between us meant nothing?" My voice broke on the question. All of it was just, what? A temporary lapse in judgment? For just a moment, pain flickered across his features, but he turned away before I could be certain I'd really seen it. "Your compensation has been transferred to your account. Guards will escort you in the morning. Pack your belongings." He walked out without looking back, leaving me alone in the ruins of everything I'd begun to hope for. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to cry, unable to process the devastation. I'd lost Aiden's trust, lost Kale's affection, lost the strange family I'd been foolish enough to imagine we might become. Dawn arrived far too quickly. Guards knocked on my door precisely as the sun crested the horizon, ready to remove me from the palace as if I were nothing more than unwanted cargo. But as they led me through the corridors one final time, a small figure suddenly darted in front of us. "Stop!" Aiden screamed, his face blotchy from a night of crying. "Don't take him. Father, please don't let them take Coulson." Kale emerged from a nearby doorway, and I realized he'd been waiting, watching. His carefully blank expression cracked as he looked at his distraught son. Aiden ran to me, throwing his arms around my waist, with desperate strength. "I'm sorry, I was angry. I don't care about the rumors anymore. Please don't go, Coulson. I need you. I need you so much." My vision blurred with fresh tears as I looked helplessly at Kale, silently begging him to reconsider. What happened next shocked everyone present. The Emperor, the man who never showed weakness, who never bent to anyone's will, dropped to his knees before us. His eyes met mine, raw and vulnerable and utterly exposed. "I was wrong," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't let you go. I tried to convince myself it was the right choice, the noble sacrifice, but it's not. It's cowardice. I'm terrified of losing someone I care about again, so I pushed you away before you could leave on your own. But that's not strength, that's fear, and I'm done being ruled by it." He reached out, taking both Aiden and me into his embrace. "I love you, Coulson. Not because you remind me of my wife. Not because you're convenient or useful, but because you've shown me how to feel again, how to hope again, how to imagine a future that doesn't terrify me. And Aiden loves you too. We both need you in our lives. If you'll still have us after everything I've put you through." The tears I'd been holding back finally fell. "I love you too," I whispered. "Both of you. So much it scares me." Kale kissed me then, not possessive or demanding, but tender and full of promise. When we separated, Aiden wrapped his small arms around both of us, completing the circle. Are we a real family now? He asked hopefully. Kale smiled, genuinely, openly for perhaps the first time in years. Yes, Aiden, we're a family, and this time I'm not letting fear drive us apart. Standing there in the morning light, surrounded by the two people who'd somehow become my entire world, I finally understood something fundamental. I hadn't come to this palace by accident. Fate had brought me here to find exactly where I belonged. Home wasn't a place. It was these two hearts beating alongside mine, creating something beautiful from broken pieces, and I was never letting go.